Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Roll With It. This day, we are going to be talking about failure and tragedy. This is a topic that came up from one of my good friends, Jeff Doty. He was talking about this on his channel recently and talking about one of his characters, a character named Phelim. It had something pretty tragic happen to him in the last episode of their campaign. If you want to check that out, go over to our Jarl DM. It's titled Saga. That's episode 9, so you're going to have to watch a lot, but it's great. Highly recommend it. So I wanted to specifically talk about tragedy and what it means as a genre. Like, why is it a part of storytelling? Tragedy moves people. It evokes emotion. It adds tension to situations and creates an environment in which characters can both learn and thrive. What do I mean when I say this? When I say this, I mean that a character can't know what it feels like to succeed, to properly know what it feels like to succeed without failing. And you might disagree, but I believe that failure makes success poignant and makes it into something powerful. And if a character only succeeds, then and they never ever fail, success starts to become less and less sweet. It and the peak of failure of a character's failure is tragedy. When tragedy strikes, when your character dies, when they nat one an important role to stop the villain, et cetera, et cetera. And these failures culminate into tragedy, but they're necessary. They're feelings that everyone fails. Everyone has to fail. It's something that everyone experiences in life. It's realistic, and failure makes the game beautiful. Now, what do I mean when I say that? When I say it makes the game beautiful, I'm specifically thinking about one of my favorite books of all time. It's a series by Patrick Rothfuss called The Name of the Wind. And the second book, A Wise Man's Fear, there's a character in that scene named Breton who plays games with the main character, Quoth. And this game is called Tack. And I imagine Tack looks something a little bit like Go. It's a game that they played in ancient China with like little pieces. It's almost like a really complicated version of chess. But Tack, there's this moment in the game. Quoth likes to succeed. He likes to win, and he finally beats Breton in a game, and he's super excited about it. And Breton looks at him and says, and he's angry about it, and he says again, and they play again, and Breton just destroys him. And he says again, and he plays him again, and Breton just destroys him again. And Quoth says, like, okay, I understand, I get it. Like, yeah, you beat me, fine. I'm not as good as I thought I was, because he was boasting before. But Breton tells him that there's no point in playing the game if you can't make it into a beautiful game. And that's where I think failure comes into play in our hobby, that is, the hobby of tabletop RPGs. Failure makes the game beautiful. It makes your characters feel real, like people feel like they have something on the line, that they can't afford to make these mistakes, but they do. And to me, that is the culmination of role playing, is when you start to understand your character and feel things with them, when you start to see what affects them most, what failures drive them, what failures make them want to give up. That is what makes the game beautiful. I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of my characters that I've played in games that have failed, and how much more those characters stand out to me in my mind because of these failures. There will be spoilers, so I'll name the game from here. I'll name the games that these characters were in, so you can go and watch them if you want to. But the first one is a character that I actually played in one of Jeff Doty's game called Jeremiah, and the name was called The Vanguard. It's a Gloam game. And Jeremiah, spoiler alert. So if you want to watch the game, don't watch from here. Well, at least skip this part. Jeremiah was a member of this Vanguard, this group called the Vanguard. They're like expert hunters and killers and fighters, whatever. For the setting that Matt Click came up with called Gloam. It's like a Lovecraftian, colonial post-apocalyptic. I mean, like, it's like there's, they've got like muskets and stuff, but he was a member of this group, this highly trained group, and the person who trained him was this commander. I don't remember what the commander's name was, but Jeremiah viewed him as like a father in many ways. So I didn't know how Jeremiah was how he's going to handle the situation of this man running away with important secrets of about the surviving colonies, and basically defecting to the enemy side. Jeremiah and his group, we hunted him down, and there was this scene at the end where Jeremiah dropped his weapons and tackled this man, his father figure, to the ground, and was just bear hugging him, holding him down, pinning him. And he brought his father figure back to lucidity enough for him to kill both himself and Jeremiah. Now, what happened, it wasn't actually a fight. It was just a 0 to dead, basically. Well, it was from like, I don't remember what it was, but it was like from like 3/4 health to dead, just immediately. And I could have felt cheated by that decision that Jeff made to have this character with strange command over the gloam kill both himself and Jeremiah in one fell swoop. But I didn't. I felt like it was exactly what Jeremiah would have wanted, was to bring this man back long enough for him to do the right thing, and if need be, die with him. So this character strikes me as one of my favorites that I've played, simply because of that final ending and the way that he had an opportunity to essentially die alongside the man who he cared most about, who he viewed in the best light that he could possibly view him. The second one I wanted to talk about was a character named Alette in a game called The Skelfing. So again, tune out if you don't want to hear this, but this was on Lloyd's Jarl DM channel. It was played in his setting of Iskloft. And Alette, she was a hunter, it was the class is called the Night Hunter, but she's like a gatherer she's like a specialized hunter ranger for this mighty Jarl who's on his deathbed, essentially. And she went north, as far north as they've gone. There's tons of superstition in this setting. But to get quickly through this, she ends up dying at the end. And that is largely in part due to the fact that they fought these crazy dark elves things. I think they were called Svarthalfur or Svarthalfur, something like that. But she died in this final fight, and I mean, I had the chance to narrate like what was going through her head as she was failing death saves. She nat 1-1 and then was killed by this main creature, this ice Svarthalfur. She narrated, and again, this is kind of the father figure trope. She saw the Jarl, who treated her very poorly, as kind of the man who removed the wool from her eyes and taught her how to be strong, because her father couldn't defend her when she was taken from her city by this Reaver gang. But I had the opportunity to, as she was failing and dying, to narrate how she was basically put down by this Jarl, Uther Kolbrander, Uthil. Throughout her entire life, how she was told she was weak and how she needed to be stronger. And it was a very strong moment for me, especially because it fit the idea of the death hallucination very well. And number two, because it was an opportunity for me to show what drove Alette. She didn't say very much throughout the course of the story. And that failure, that death, was able to demonstrate who she was. Now, I've had other characters who have died in other stories, or who have had crazy experiences due to their backstory. So if you want to check them out, there's one called Hakan, who I played in Lionel DeHetries. He's on the channel, Two Guys T and D&D, Lair of the White Worm, who his ending was pretty tragic as well. I don't think the end is available in that video, sadly, but it's a great game. Watch it. But what I'm trying to say here is that it's okay to fail and it's okay to succeed, but failure makes success sweeter. It's a staple of storytelling for a reason. I mean, you'll see in many novels, movies, that often a character will fail before they're able to succeed. They'll come to a false conclusion before they're able to come to the right one. Somebody important to them will die because of their actions, and it drives the character. But none of this would have been possible without a failure. I mean, if we look at Star Wars, this is a familiar one. It's episode 4. Ben, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and if you don't know this, like, I don't feel bad saying this one. You should have seen Star Wars by now. But Ben dies right before Luke in a duel with Darth Vader. And this is interesting because it's one of the few connections that Luke has left to who his real father is. And Ben has been training him, Obi-Wan Kenobi. So this death is pretty tragic for him, but it pushes him. It makes him into a better person. It makes him into a more successful character. If a character always succeeds, then it's boring. They become a boring character because the successes become less poignant. They become less important to the character themselves. And these failures will motivate the character to act and to push themselves beyond. That is why you should let your characters fail. That is why when your character dies, you shouldn't feel cheated about it. You should recognize that that character had their moment. They were able to push themselves to strive to move beyond what they thought was possible and ultimately fail. But that's fine. That's what makes this game into a beautiful game. As one final note, let your characters fail so you can play a beautiful game. Don't be afraid of the nat 1. Narrate that failure and let it push your character to be better. Make tragedy allow tragedy to become part of who your character is. So those are my thoughts on failure and tragedy as a response to, again, Jeff Doty from Counterbalance. If you haven't subscribed, go subscribe to him. But I also wanted to plug one last thing, and that is that again from this video I talked a lot about some characters and Alette from Iskloft, and that is now on Kickstarter. If you are looking to get into a brutal Viking-themed savage setting created by Jarl DM Lloyd Collins, go over to Kickstarter, look it up, and there's it's a really good deal to get in on this. It's going to be an awesome setting for you to have at your disposal. There are a lot of new mechanics, new classes, lots of new archetypes, a whole new background system, and it's just a great thing. I've had an opportunity to play in several games. If you want to see what the setting's more about, go to Jarl DM on YouTube. But yeah, that's all. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, if you like what you see on my channel, feel free to like and subscribe. And as always, I hope you find yourselves in your games on a roll.